Cool. Okay, so thanks for coming. As the intro told you, we're going to talk about migrating weather.com to Drupal today. It's a pretty fun talk. It was a great project, a lot of interesting parts to it. So I'm going to stay somewhat high level. We're going to take, towards the end, a dive into some of the code and the back end of weather.com's actual application. But if I'm missing something that you want to discuss or you wanted to linger on a subject for a little bit longer, please speak up and we'll address whatever your questions are as we go, and then we can hopefully not miss anything that you might be thinking about. So, all right. First of all, let's see if we can do this. Who am I? Yeah, you just heard my intro, but I am James Rutherford. I'm Director of Client Services at Mediacurrent. I've been working there for almost 5 years now. I've been doing Director of Client Services for about 6 months. Before that, I was a lead Drupal architect and worked on a number of fun projects, including this one, Georgia.gov's migration as well, and GPB here in town, and a lot of other different projects. So I've been doing Drupal development since about 2008, and web development as a whole for more than a decade. So really enjoy what I do, really enjoy the people I work with, and getting to work on these kinds of projects is a lot of fun. All right. Let's talk about Mediacurrent, since I work for Mediacurrent, and it came up. Mediacurrent was one of the agencies working on this project, obviously. We help organizations build highly impactful, elegantly designed Drupal websites that achieve strategic results that those organizations need. And we do everything in Drupal. One of the things that's great about Mediacurrent is that it's a really fun company to work for. We take culture extremely seriously. So we hire incredibly talented people, and working with them is always interesting, but it's also important that we hire people that care about what they do and about their coworkers. So it's a great place to work. It's a great environment to work with Drupal, and it sort of is a mini example of the whole Drupal contrib ethos and community. So we're actually hiring too. So if you guys are on the fence and maybe thinking about making a career move into Drupal full time, check out our website. Okay, let's look at our agenda. So today we're going to talk about weather.com. We're going to learn a little bit about Weather Channel, where they came from in their CMS, why they chose Drupal, what problems they were having before they moved on to Drupal. We're going to talk about the actual implementation itself. So I'll share stories of the challenges that we overcame and talk about what it was like working with the Weather Channel over almost 2+ years on the project. And we'll take a look at the actual resolution itself. What did we use in Drupal to solve the problems that the Weather Channel had? And then we'll do a demo. Hopefully you guys are interested, but we'll take a dive into the back end of it, and we'll show off some of the cool things that we built specifically for Weather Channel that you guys might not have an opportunity to see by looking at the front end of the site. And then we'll finish with Q&A. So the very first person I want to talk about is Jason Smith. Jason is a solutions architect at Mediacurrent, and is a great guy. He was the project lead on this, and it doesn't seem right to give a presentation about the Weather Channel without mentioning Jason. The architecture itself came from his mind, and he was instrumental in working very closely with TWC to build the relationship that allowed us to succeed on this project. So Jason couldn't be here, and you'll be thankful for that, because I'm not going to have all of his terrible puns and jokes that he normally has, but feel free to hit him up on Twitter at DrupalJason. So if any of you guys saw on the web or in person, Jason gave a similar talk to this in Austin last year at DrupalCon Austin, which I reuse a little bit of his material because it's relevant, but we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive than he did, and also have the perspective of having the project having actually launched from that point. So thank you, Jason. Okay. Weather Channel, weather.com. How many people have actually been to weather.com to use it? You guys raise your hand? Almost the whole room, except for that guy. He's on weather.com right now. So yeah, amazingly popular website, top 100 in the US and somewhere in the top 200 in Alexa in the world, I believe. When there's a major storm, they shoot way up in the rankings to top 5, top 10, depending on the storm and whether or not it's a catastrophe or anything like that. So by the numbers, it's an absolutely massive amount of traffic, something like 50 million page views a day, 30 million uniques a month, and they can get in the neighborhood of 300 million a day when there is a disaster. So anybody architecting for this kind of traffic is going to have a number of challenges. And that is one of the things that sort of guided the project and what solutions we could do, what architectural choices we could make, was dealing with the absolute massive amount of traffic that the Weather Channel gets. The other important thing about their traffic is that it has to be timely. We couldn't just build these pages and then cache them forever, because people are looking for up-to-the-minute information about the weather itself. They want to know what the weather's like absolutely right now, and they also want to know what the latest news in a story is. If they're covering a tornado or a disaster, a snowstorm, people want to know what happened instantly. So caching also is majorly problematic with the amount of traffic and type of data that they have. All right, so based on their old system and based on their needs going into this project, the Weather Channel was able to identify a number of high-level challenges that they thought were, what they wanted to focus on when they rebuilt their site. So those challenges include simplifying and integrating legacy systems. They have multiple legacy systems, that some of which they still use to this day. Weather Channel has almost always done their development in-house and is possessive of a lot of top quality engineering talent, so they are very quick to build a solution internally before they look to an outside vendor or to a third-party resource, which is a great ability to have, but they also have a back end littered with systems of people that quit or got fired or moved on, and their documentation left with them. So that is a big problem for them and a huge pain, and sort of as part of this process, they wanted to get rid of as many of those legacy systems as they could and unite everything under a common platform. They wanted to simplify their content management system. They wanted to make it easier for their editors to create great content and get it published out to the web as soon as possible. They were previously on a proprietary system called Percussion, and based on the way that they did media and categorization, at some places it could take up to 14 clicks to publish an article. So that was one of the numbers that we heard about early and often, and one of the metrics that we use to make decisions is to make the editorial process as easy as possible. We talked a little bit about why cache management is such a problem, and we'll continue to talk about that throughout this presentation. I think it's kind of obvious based on the traffic and data type. And then finally, they wanted the ability to create new products and get them to market as soon as possible. They wanted to, have a representative work with one of their advertisers, determine that advertiser wanted a new package. Home Depot wants to splash their logo all over the Today pages, and they want to do it in a certain way with a certain cool new front-end framework or new technique, and they wanted to be able to do it very quickly. And at the time that they started the project, TWC had no answer for that. But when they were done, that was one of the impetus there, the ability to build quickly, test, and deploy new products, new widgets on their pages. So keep these in mind as we go through the presentation. We'll be addressing each of them and talking about how Drupal and Mediacurrent were able to answer these challenges. All right, so more of the backstory for TWC. Apparently they spent about 5 months evaluating frameworks and different content management systems, so they didn't just say Drupal, which I guess makes sense. They wanted to look at all the different products that they could. As part of the evaluation process, they built a scorecard listing their challenges and different requirements so that they could rate the different vendors and frameworks. And when they settled on Drupal as part of the evaluation process, they reached out to Acquia and to Mediacurrent to do that evaluation. It was important to them, I think, to have a vendor that was in their backyard, and Mediacurrent fulfilled that role. We're headquartered here in Atlanta. And they were able to work with us on site to test out Drupal. So we sent a team over there. We built a proof of concept in Drupal and talked to them about some of the challenges that they were facing and how we thought that Drupal might be able to solve those challenges. That POC was successful. They were pretty happy with what they saw and excited about Drupal, excited enough to commit to a pilot project. So we're still not migrating all of weather.com to Drupal. They just wanted to, say, Drupal might be the one for us. Let's evaluate it some more. How about you guys take our article editorial system, which is one of these old decrepit systems, and rebuild it in Drupal and solve some of these problems. And we'll see how that goes. So we did that. It's about 5 months. I have able to accommodate shifting needs up there. That's an underlying theme at the Weather Channel. Their needs change instantly, like on a dime. You can be halfway done with a widget, just about to deliver, and they'll come in and say, oh, we don't need that anymore. Build this, and I want it yesterday. And fortunately, Drupal as a framework is very powerful in its ability to pivot and allow you to reuse components. So that was something that we were able to succeed with. But this actual project, which I didn't work on, but Derek right there did. Derek, you want to wave at everybody? Was incredibly successful. We were able to not only build a good pilot project that they liked, but they liked it so much that they replaced their entire editorial backend system with it as soon as it launched. And while we were actually doing the migration project for weather.com, they were publishing using Drupal the entire time of that project, almost a full year or maybe a little over a year. And we were able to, work in parallel while we met their current editorial demands with Drupal and then built towards their future editorial demands and share code between the two projects, which was a real advantage for them. They were able to continue to shift as the project went on, and I think it also helped give us the lifetime to not rush things and build the platform that they needed because they were able to mitigate some of their early demands. And that's our wonderful project team. Okay, so before we get into the actual project itself, let's take a step back and say, all right, at this point, they're feeling great about Drupal. Why? Why is Drupal working for the Weather Channel? Like, why are they willing to commit to this pilot project? And now that that's successful, why did they select Drupal over all of the other competing frameworks and CMSs? And I think the reason why comes down to their scorecard. I mean, compared to the other technologies that they looked at, Drupal fit across all of the criteria that they weighted as the most important. So it's an open source project. They wanted to use open source if possible and move away from the restraints of a proprietary system, move away from the licensing fees of a proprietary system, and harness open source. They wanted to be able to harness the open source community to extend their development team the way that people utilize Drupal's contrib community. So that was important to them. They wanted to utilize a talented local vendor. Our POC working out with them was extremely important. They wanted to have a vendor that was an expert that they couldn't do in-house, but also have them be extremely closely tied to them. We spent a lot of time working on site with the Weather Channel people. I mean, weeks and weeks at a time. Jason was fully embedded there for more than a year, the ability to communicate in person and the ability to know them as well as they know themselves was a key to, a huge key to success on this project. And then finally, some of the more high-level things that maybe Drupal enthusiasts already recognize, but feature velocity, we talked about that earlier, right? The ability to develop new components quickly, test them, and deploy them. Scalability and maintainability and ease of use, the improvement on the back end, which the pilot project and the POC both showed them were possible. So that's why they chose Drupal. There's also some more high-level business benefits, which I just touched on. The ability to leave a proprietary system and leave all of those licensing fees on the table. For a company as large as Weather, that does as much traffic and as many page views as they do, proprietary systems can be very expensive. And they weren't able to get the speed of development as well as the ability to bend the proprietary system to their needs. And that was something that Drupal does extremely well. Okay, so starting the migration. The first thing we did after, signing all the paperwork was get into our processes. We sent Jason on site to live with the Weather Channel people to learn what all of their business requirements are, not just what they thought they needed, but to understand every single aspect of what they do as a company and what they do, what they want to do in the future as a company with the web as a platform. And once we felt like we had a really good understanding of that, Jason and the rest of his team started to meet with the different stakeholders and do some documentation based around what we were discovering, what we were learning from them. This was done in a really loose manner. We strove really hard not to make this a waterfall project. When you're building an application platform over a year, your requirements are going to change. We already knew from working with them during the pilot project that their requirements could change just like that. So it was more about understanding why they built the systems that they built and what they were doing with them than writing very complicated technical documentation around what the new version of this should be in Drupal. It was about learning system knowledge and really building the partnership with them. So once we were done with that phase, we assigned a project manager, who you saw on the last slide, that's Jeff Deeks, and our lead architect, Jason, and the team, and we got ready to kick off. And so the very next thing that happened, and this is one of the key phases of this project, I think, and one of the things that I remember the most, is that we had a big cookout, or what do you, crawfish boil, I guess is what you do with crawfish. I don't usually eat those, but we had a big crawfish something or other at Jason's house with all of the Weather Channel people that would be involved in the project, all of the Mediacurrent people that would be involved with the project, our families all day at Jason's house, just eating good food and getting to meet everybody. And when you take into mind the complexity and the length of time that we spent on this project, and the heated discussions that are going to happen in the future about architecture, about what appropriate timelines there are, decisions to be made, having that foundation was absolutely key. I mean, that was the first time that I met most of the TWC team, and I ended up working alongside those people for almost 7 months daily after that. So it was a great first step, and it's kind of a theme for the whole project, is that we weren't really just a vendor to Weather Channel. It was more like we were a big extension of Weather Channel's team, and we're treated as such, and we're able to therefore have great communication and overcome obstacles quickly as they came up throughout the project. Cool. So one of the great things about Drupal is right out of the box, it does amazing things. We were able to tackle some of the low-hanging fruit that they had right away at the beginning of the project. We were able to use Drupal's core functionality and a few contrib modules to build complex UIs and role relationships between content and user privileges, and do that in parallel while some of the other back-end systems were happening. So they have an entire UI team focused on the editorial experience. We used views and some of the messaging modules and rules to sort of lock down all of what that back-end user experience would be like, and do it in a way that as we extended the back end of the system, it would grow naturally the way they needed it to. And they were just excited to see that Drupal does all that right out of the box. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the process. You guys might be interested, maybe not, but I think it's important too. We had a quasi-agile process. I talked earlier about how it wasn't waterfall. We didn't just set up a big requirements document and then just plow through it and hope that everything was right when we threw the first dart. So we had regular sprints. The leadership on TWC's side, and then from our side with our PM and our lead architect, sort of had the bigger picture in mind. And the sprints were set to build the system in chunks, but build it in chunks that allowed us to match parallel development efforts at TWC. So you'll learn about, in a little bit, the front end of Weather is done in AngularJS, and it's kind of a quasi-headless implementation. So from the very beginning, the front end team is working, as we're working, building widgets and building things that will display weather data on the website itself. And we're working in parallel with them, building the back end out as we go. So managing that communication and trying to figure out which task goes into which sprint was done equally between the two teams, and had a really positive effect on the outcome of the project. That and TWC's ability to pivot. If they had a product that wasn't working, if I built a widget and demoed it to a product owner, an editor, or someone on a sales team that would, had requested it and they didn't like it, we could immediately change it, or we could discard it, or we could move forward. I can't stress enough how not being locked into, the 60 pages of requirements at the very beginning of the project allowed us to succeed and allowed us to flex when we needed to throughout the lifetime of the project. Okay. Another thing that really helped us to succeed was Drupal's contrib tools. It has as most of you know, Drupal has an amazing contributed module community, and we harness some of the bigger components of that to work on the site. So the site itself is a panels architecture. We'll talk about that in more detail in a little bit. We used views for almost all DB access and list building, etc., except for in a few places where we had a little bit more complexity. And then the theming layer for Drupal allowed the theme team to work in parallel with the development team, something I touched on earlier. And then as far as the actual development process, we had to coordinate the development effort of a 6 to 10 person development team, depending on what was due in the sprint cycle we were in, on Mediacurrent's side, with a 4 to 5 back-end and a 20-plus front-end development team on the Weather Channel side, which, as you can imagine, is extremely difficult to do. And we were able to utilize features for configuration export and Drush for automation and for command line work, as well as a few other technologies like Vagrant to have a common stack across all systems, and allowed us to collaborate fairly seamlessly. Of course, that kind of managing, that many different branches and that many different teams is tough, but it wasn't really a huge detriment to the project. Okay, so answering the challenges. This is the meat and potatoes. This is, how do we use Drupal to solve the problems that we talked about earlier, the sort of like bigger high-level problems that the Weather Channel is having? And we'll go through these sort of one at a time. So the very first one that we're going to talk about is all of the different legacy systems that Weather had. They had, maybe a system for adding images and then associating them inside the article, and then a different system for creating slideshows. And we unified all of these disparate systems into Drupal itself. We were able to do a lot with Drupal's content types and sort of normal data modeling, and make it so that the editorial experience was a single stop for everything that editors had to do. That sounds like fairly normal, but this was a revolution to the people at Weather, and they absolutely loved it. We also were able to do this in a way that was extremely flexible and extendable, which we'll take a dive into later. So this was not some of it stock Drupal and some of it custom framework plugging into stock Drupal modules, which would allow them to extend it themselves with almost no PHP knowledge moving forward. And then when we needed to, there were still some legacy platforms and services that they kept around, and we were able to use the services module to communicate with those, push data back and forth between Drupal and, for example, the scaling caching layer and older legacy systems that needed to be kept updated. We needed to simplify content entry. We talked a little bit about all the steps that the editorial team was taking. They also were having to hand edit fragments of XML inside of their articles in order to place things like the slideshows that they created, or images or videos. Extremely messy, extremely prone to errors. And of course, anyone that is an actual writer or editor doesn't want to be creating XML fragments. So we were able to overcome those issues and provide them with a seamless UI experience where instead of having to create XML fragments, they would just utilize the toolbar, the WYSIWYG, and I'm going to wander. I didn't think I was going to wander, but microphone. Oh, I've got this guy right here. Recording. Oh, it's all right. I'll come back. They were able to, you guys wanted to see this, right? Okay. I don't have a laser pointer, so. All right, so this is your standard WYSIWYG toolbar. Over here on the right side, these are all custom plugins that we developed. And we developed these in a way that allowed them to actually create their own without writing any code. But the way the plugins work is that they're actual real entities inside Drupal. They're their own content types. And so if a user wants to drop an image into an article, they would choose one of the image buttons at the top, upload an image into that into the modal that shows up, and then fill out the metadata that was required to show the instance in different image instance in different ways. They could build a slideshow right there in the article. They could pull images from other data sources that they've already uploaded and compose slideshows or videos there, and extend that in the future just by creating a new content type in Drupal. We actually built a custom field that once that field is added to a content type, and then the data in the field is populated, like where you see the little thumbnail image and the field itself are part of that content type, that then provides the ability of one of these widgets to be added to a toolbar and extending the system. Now, so that's called the Wix node framework, and that was a huge, huge win for them. The data for these also is not saved, well, it's saved in the article, but each thing is a first-class entity, so it's Drupal content. Yes, you, sir.
I just wanted to point out that actually did get shipped back, and it's known as the Wizard Field module. I always call that Wizard Field.
Yeah, that's my big ender slide, so maybe you could just.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, I'm good. If you could just have everyone sit down, that'd be great. No. No.
I did have a question about media. What did you guys end up using for media management?
Yeah, excuse me. We use the media module. Yeah, with the 2x or 3x branch with file entity, and yeah, we actually. I mean, the media module has its quirks, but it worked really well for us. It allowed us to extend the media browser itself and build some custom UI components into that to aid them with searching for media throughout the system. And media itself is plugged into the storage API model, so all of their assets are stored in S3 up in the cloud. And yeah, it worked. Media can be difficult at times, but it gave us the base functionality we needed, and we were able to extend it pretty successfully. The other things that make up this page, since we're on modules, is obviously that's CK Editor, and then we're using the WYSIWYG module, which provides its own API for plugins in the back end. And that's how we're able to harness content types and have them instantly be available to editors inside of the WYSIWYG itself. So this kind of answers your question, but we also, as we talked about, we implemented the media module, and we utilized image styles to simplify the editorial process. So automatic slicing and resizing of images. An editor could just upload a single image for an article that could then be consumed across multiple devices without having to take a guess or having to be restricted to certain image ratios. So yeah, and then finally, they had the need to be able to intelligently categorize and organize their content. The taxonomy of weather.com drives a lot of the site architecture, including the URLs and different subsystems that communicate with Drupal to look for content. They do that using taxonomy. So we used taxonomy's capability pretty much right out of the box, and just added a few contrib modules to improve the UI experience. All right, so page building. We kind of looked at article creation. Page building itself is a challenge for a number of reasons. One, they have a number of different types of pages. They have location pages, they have one-off pages, they have location pages that are part of groups or organized in different ways. And so we needed a tool that allowed us a great amount of flexibility to have them build pages using the UI, but also serve up the different kinds of data that they needed and fulfill the ability to change URL structures on the fly. So we used panels and page manager module. So panels allowed us to solve the problem of having different types of presentation and page layouts all organized together. So a single editor could create a base page for laying out, sort of a big web variant, which would be like your desktop view. And then another editor could come along behind them and just clone that variant. So reusing all the content that's already in there, reusing that process and the widgets that are there, not have to know anything about that. Assign it a different layout built specifically for mobile, and change the selection rule to say, use this on mobile or use this just on tablet. And then drag and drop things around, and bam, we've got a new variant of the page that serves just for mobile. The other great thing about panels and page manager is that it allows you to write your own selection rules. So out of the box, it provides selection rules based on URL or based on context, things in the URL. But we needed a little bit better mobile detection. We needed URLs based on some of the really crazy things in the caching layer for ESI. And panels allows you to do that. You can write logic that plugs in and provides those selection rules to the system. Incredibly powerful tool, and while it's not always the prettiest backend, they really were able to adapt to it. So here's this is kind of an example of variant selection through context evaluation. You might have this article page, and inside the system itself, it's going to say this is an article of this type, and then first thing is, what location is this article? It's in Stone Mountain. So we're passing that context onto the article. The article now knows that it's in Stone Mountain based on the location ID and the URL, and stuff in there populates, and then we detect that it's a device, desktop, and that we're in severe weather mode right now. And as you can see, the layout in the middle has the appropriate severe alert space. The other great thing about this, and you'll see it when we get to that step, is that we built a framework for them to be able to build their own widgets and then use them in the page building process. And this sort of connects that contextual aspect of it, right? It gives them access to their own location data through the URL, and also the other data that the browser provides through selection rule plugins. Okay, so let's talk about cache management. Oh yeah, go ahead. No, that's cool.
So what did you guys use in combination with panels for the mobile detection? Did you use Breakpoint or did you use something different?
You mean for the actual display of the pages?
Yeah, like, so you're basically serving different content based on like the detection of the device, right? Like the layout?
Yeah, we are serving a different layout, and in some cases different widgets and content inside of that.
So what did you use to let panels know context?
Yeah, we wrote a custom plugin that basically requests whether or not it's mobile and what kind of device it is from the browser or from the actual request itself, and then passes it through to the system. Cool. All right, so cache management is a challenge. They're serving data across 2 million something locations, all with unique weather data, serving 60 million pages or something like that of content, and all of it has to be served very fast with very low TTLs for the most part. So the cache layer and how the cache system is built could be its own like hour-long presentation. So I'm going to stay pretty high level, and then you guys please feel free to ask questions. But in a nutshell, at the very top we have Akamai serving all of the traffic as it goes out, right? So Akamai is the very first caching layer. Akamai is serving the majority of their content, and we're using ESIs in Akamai to serve slightly fresher data in certain areas. And then at the next level, you're going to hit Varnish, and then from Varnish, requests will go down to Drupal. Hopefully not too many, so the servers don't melt. But let's take a look at, even with Akamai in front of all this traffic, and with Varnish behind that, and then Drupal tuned as well as we could possibly tune Drupal, their traffic was just absolutely too much if you were to serve this as a normal Drupal site. The idea that each one of these pages is a record in Drupal and a new request to Drupal, it just won't work. So the way that we mitigated this was by putting the data that had low TTLs and that needed to be served up across all these locations into a third-party system that could scale. The Weather Channel built their own MongoDB scalable key value store, and Drupal talks directly to that system when it's serving up weather and location data to users. So the model is something like this. If you're looking at a page, let's say this is an article page, and we've got Dave in Roswell and Jason in Stone Mountain, they're going to get data that's relevant to their location and to the weather that's around them. I mean, the articles themselves might be based on whatever that weather data is. So those look like two very different pages, but in reality, we're just serving up the same base page. Drupal gets one request and serves up one base page, and then when the page is delivered to the browser, the front-end framework, in this case we're using AngularJS, processes the context information and then goes and talks to that data store and pulls in the relevant weather data, all seamlessly so that the user obviously doesn't know. But from Drupal's perspective, we've served one page for potentially thousands of locations. Pretty awesome. Cool. All right, so one of the other big requirements that we hammered on was the ability for TWC to increase their development velocity. They really wanted the flexibility to dream up their next widget, their next page, their next experience for the user, implement it very, very quickly, and then launch it without having to become Drupal experts, right? They didn't want to hire us to build everything from now to the end of time. What they do have on staff is a very talented front-end team. So what we did was come up with a system that would allow Drupal to understand any front-end work widgets that they built and do it in such a way that was extremely pluggable. So essentially what we did was build our own presentation framework. And all this presentation framework does a lot, but at its core what it does is read JSON manifest files that are provided by these front-end widgets and translate them into what Drupal needs to use them inside the system. So that allowed us to have an entirely separate front-end team go ahead and develop whatever they wanted to develop. The beautiful 5-day forecast thing that you see when you go to the 5-day weather page on there with the sun and animation and all that stuff, whatever Angular is doing there. And they didn't care about Drupal at all. They just knew that whatever data they needed from Drupal to make this page work, they could model that correctly inside of their info file, and then Drupal would be able to read that and make it work. And not only would Drupal be able to read it and make it work from a rendering perspective, but also from a page building perspective, so that once I have my 5-day forecast widget that I just built and it's got a beautiful front-end experience to it, and I create my info file in a way that correctly uses what we laid out for Drupal to be able to understand, now a page builder can go in there and see the 5-day forecast module sitting there inside of his list of page building tools and add it to any section of the site that he wants to use. And he can provide instance data to that actual widget to say that, this is the 5 days is probably a bad example, but a virtual slideshow that changes depending on the weather or location or whatever context, they could add instance data to that. We're going to take a dive into this in the code later, but it's definitely one of the coolest parts of the application. So this solved that need for them to be able to develop quickly, and it also really helped us to be able to develop independently of the front-end team. They just went and worked and did tons and tons, all the great design that you see on the on weather.com and all the great widgets and all that were developed independently of Drupal and then married through the presentation framework. Okay, so yeah, we're quasi-headless, right? Client side's doing most of the work, and some of you might be asking, well, what does that mean for SEO and metrics? Like, how does search engines understand all this work that we're doing? For the most part, we didn't trust search engines to understand it. Navigation and meta tag data and any important SEO relevant data, we were tasked with serving with the base page to make it so that would not be an issue. I think that Google and some of the other search engines are saying now that they can correctly parse the front end, but at the time that this was started, that was maybe not the case, and TWC did not want to risk that because their rankings obviously are their lifeblood. So we had to bend over backwards a little bit in some cases to say that anything that was going to be navigation-based would not be implemented through the client-side network. So a good example of that is the presentation framework that we were just talking about. If an editor wanted to create a beautiful list of links that would navigate to other parts of the site, they don't go to the menu system, and they can't create a front-end widget with instance data because that would not get crawled by the search engines. So we had to create a third wheel, something called, we ended up calling them linked lists, but anyway, it was sort of a hybrid of the two that would be built into the base page, and then we extended it so that the presentation framework could understand it, and the page composer could use it at the same time in a very similar experience, but it's really its own separate entity and functionality. We did that with the entity construction kit, if any of you guys are familiar with that. For the, for the actual meta tag and SEO experience, we also used Path Auto and tokens to make it so that they're have a lot of meta tag data across a lot of different articles, and by using tokens we're able to automate that process, but also give them the ability to override on individual items. And then finally, we reviewed and discarded PhantomJS. I don't know if anybody here has heard of PhantomJS, but it's a tool that allows you to basically have another server that reads your site, your headless implementation, and then develops HTML based on that to be crawled by the likes of Google. So you've got this bot out here that's reading all of your headless implementation, generating HTML pages, and then putting them on a server so that Drupal crawls that instead of your regular site. But it's a pretty amazing technology, but I guess the big limitation for weather was the fact that what you really end up having to do is maintain another browser with its own quirks and idiosyncrasies. So if you're building a widget that works in IE and Safari and Firefox, and now does it work in Phantom? So they said no. All right, cool. So live demo. Everybody ready? No guarantees on this live demo that anything will work at all. Oh, see, told you.
The Weather Channel site just went down.
Yeah, I gotta go. My phone is ringing right now. All right, so we're looking at a local install of a development build of Weather. It's probably a little bit old at this point, it might be a little stale. But yeah, this is a local version that's maybe about a week old. And what I wanted to look at with you guys today was the actual content creation. So we'll go and edit an article and see how that works. And then we'll take a look at the page building and the presentation layer and kind of make the connection between what you're seeing when you're looking at a widget on the page and how it was implemented in the back end by Weather Channel's team. Okay? Okay. And it's a little awkward for me to steer sideways like this, so please be patient. All right, so yeah, this is the homepage of weather.com. Not totally interesting. This is an article on weather. A fake article, but an article nonetheless. You might immediately notice that we did some modifications to the administration page, just slight to make it a little bit easier to read and move things together, because Drupal tends to be kind of sprawling when you just use it out of the box. And let's take a look down here at what we talked about earlier. This is our article body, and these are video widgets that I've embedded inside of this article. So the way that I did that was by choosing the video pixel widget here. And once I choose that, I get a modal that pops up. And in this case, I want to find a video, let's say about tornadoes from the video library. Nice. All right, so what we did there is just go and search all of the video assets that Weather has for the word tornado, and then allows us to, I don't know, we'll select like 3 of those. The editor here has the ability to search by description or by keyword, and then they also have the ability to search collections of videos, and then search by playlist or ordered collection, which are taxonomies specific to the way Weather organizes their content. We can see the videos that we selected, and then we can have options specific to this instance of this widget, right? This is where the beauty of this happens. I mean, they're not all the same across the board. Sometimes they want it to be a collection and they don't want to show a playlist, or sometimes they want to show a description for each video. And you know, by giving the editor the ability to make those decisions inside of the system, and the front end team the freedom to read that data and then you know, build amazing presentations on top of that, you really give them the ability to go as fast as they want to go and do, you know, whatever their team dreams up. And finally, we have the ability here to go to another layer of complexity where the presentation module itself could provide multiple templates that might indicate different ways of layout, because the presentation layer actually allows for normal PHP style templates. It doesn't have to be headless per widget. Okay, so let's save that. And what we've done now is that actually created an entity in Drupal and created a new icon inside of the system. And we can say, oops, we didn't want to do tornadoes. Let's do floods. Hopefully there's flood data. There's floods. And yeah, we want it to be about floods. And then we'll get rid of these tornadoes that we don't want. And save it. So, okay, we've created our weather node, we've added it to the body of our article, and then we'll go ahead and save it. So at this point, if I save the article, that token is now, or that icon is now decoded in a way that's safe to store in the database and then put into the system. At the exact same time, a data export of this article is pushed out to the key value store system that we talked about earlier, which they call DSX. And all of the actual individual items inside of there, the 3 videos that we've created, their instance data is also turned into JSON object notation and pushed out to DSX as well. This gives them the ability to create articles here on weather and then have their mobile phone app consume it, or any third-party system that they want. So any data that's curated in Drupal is going to be pushed out to DSX. That doesn't mean that Drupal always serves it. Or, I'm sorry, it doesn't mean that DSX always serves it. In this case, if this article is viewed through the system, then Drupal will serve up the article, serve up the content title, et cetera, all the navigation that goes in the base page, and then we'll know how to render these video widgets and look for the correct presentation layer and template to put it on the page for either Angular or a TPL to render that file and consume it. Everybody with me so far? All right, great. Cool. So that is articles, and let's just save it and see what happens. It's a little slow on my laptop. It's running inside of a Vagrant instance that simulates their environment, but it's not a ton of memory. And then we can actually look at our shark scares clear as popular beach. And we should see some videos.
Did you guys create your own administration theme, or did you use something else and just alter it?
Yeah, I think it's 7 with custom CSS. I think was the base for it. Yeah. In some places it's heavily customized, and in some places it's just stock. It just depends on. Oh man, that's what happens when you get a live demo. Of course. Yeah. I don't know what I did. Should have videos. So on to page building. All right. Let's take a look at. If you guys want to see a real live article, we can go out to their website. All right, yeah. So let's take a look at page building. So this is the homepage of weather.com. This is their actual live homepage, and I thought I might talk a little bit about what we've been talking about. So when you are looking at the homepage, you have navigation, search bar. This top level navigation is all delivered inside the base page itself, but this weather data, this image right here, these articles, and the fact that we're seeing these articles, these are all determined by the context of where we are right now. The fact that, actually, it's determined by the fact that I'm always interested in Boston. So the last place I looked was the weather in Boston. So it's giving me Boston data right now based on my user history. These articles are relevant to that region. Will snow ruin your weekend? That's not really relevant if you're here in Atlanta, but it's served up for Boston traffic. And every one of these is a widget inside of the inside of panels itself that you guys were just looking at. We'll take a look at how that works here in just a second. But the advertisements to this giant image and all the articles and weather widgets down below, those are all built using that presentation framework. This is just a hop and a skip and a jump away, but this is the homepage inside of panels. And you can see that we're on the default variant. There's a variant if we're in severe weather mode. If there's a severe storm, then a privileged administrator will go log into Drupal, go to the severe mode UI page and toggle that we're in severe mode, put a message in there. And now when when Drupal sends up the next version of this page and evaluates, it'll say I'm in severe weather mode. And it'll serve up this variant with different components, a slightly different layout, and different data.
Is it kind of integrated with the National Weather Service alert system?
Well, their idea, I don't know. So that component is not. I'm not sure what they do with that, but I think, and this is just my personal opinion, weather sort of has their own mythology behind that, right? Like they name their own storms, and so they're sort of like what their definition of is.
An alert's issued by the National Weather Service, an alert.
Right, that's like an official alert. What I'm saying is like to them, it's more arbitrary to them. What they're saying is a severe alert, right? I think I could be wrong. Maybe when that alert gets issued, they run over here and flip the switch. I'm not sure. That would be really cool though. Okay, so in our header on the homepage, we have a number of add modules in place, and I'm just going to marry the data a little bit here. So when a page builder was building this page, they went here and hit the little wheel and said add content, and then they were able to select from the add section an add position module, and then place it on the page. And then using that add position module, they said, well, I want it to be editorial large, it's got to be refreshable, I want it to be, whatever their requirements for this particular ad were, they filled that out. And then saved it. and that becomes an instance on the page, which they can drag and drop between regions. Once this is saved, double check that I'm logged into my local. That would be bad. Once this is saved and the page is re-rendered and served out, the instance choices made right there are actually served out as part of the base page and to be consumed by the front end framework. So let's take a look at that right now. Might be a little bit hard to see, but what I'm doing is using the console to explore the Drupal JavaScript object. And right here we have our context that let us know what's going on the base page. And then we have actual instances of all the different widgets. And the new one that we just created is right here with its own instance ID and all of its own instance data. And so when it's embedded into the page for Angular to consume, the instance ID is passed forward to the Angular framework, and the type of module that it is passed forward to Angular, and the front-end development work is able to pick up that information and go find the instance data and render the widget, whatever it is. So let's look at that on the back end. Am I running out of time here, by the way? Yes. Okay, I'll be faster. Sorry. You get long-winded. Okay, so the add module that we were just looking at, this is the JSON info file that I was talking about earlier that unites the two systems, right? This is a little bit hard to read, so we're going to see if we can. That's a little better. Can you guys read that? Cool. Okay, great. So what you can't see over here is this is an add module itself. A lot of files in here. This is the info file we're looking at. This is the art assets and template file, and here's the JavaScript that powers it. This is the actual Angular code right here. What Drupal cares about is our info file. So every time that someone goes to build a page in panels, or when we go to render a page, Drupal has strapped and has crawled through all of these different widgets. And it reads all of these info files, and in doing so, it knows what to put into the base page, where to point the Angular code itself to find the instance data, what to pass to Angular in order to do that. It can understand what the TTL is, what's the time to live for this particular widget. Versioning for all the widgets across the board, and this is something that they take very seriously, so that they always know which versions of which components work with which versions of the backend. And also because they have a very complex deployment system based around versioning. Presentation, this one presents in line. It could be ESI, it could be Angular. Template files to be used, and then finally the actual data that this is good too. Dependencies, if there's libraries or something that this particular widget uses, Drupal knows to load them, add them, CSS for it, and then the configuration itself. So this field data corresponds exactly to what we just saw in that modal pop-up, and is editable by the developer. So if I'm a front-end widget making guy, I don't have to care at all about whether or not Drupal, can create forms that a user can put data into. All I have to do is correctly follow our examples here to put instance fields in there, and all this is a straight analog of Drupal's web form API. And I'm able to get the data that I need for my widget to be consumed, and do that very, very quickly, and do it in a way that I can, test and not worry about this. Just build this piece last based on what the Angular JS widget is wanting. All right, cool. All right, so that concludes the live demo with only one white screen of death, which is not too bad. So I'm going to kind of rush through this because I think we're getting really late. So how was the change reception at TWC? What did they think of the new system? There's no other way to describe it other than a wild success. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. They loved the new system. Editorial team loved it. The architecture team loved it. We were able to reduce the number of servers, reduce their cost, total cost of ownership of the entire site by eliminating licensing fees and making it easier to host and serve these pages. Their development teams loved it. They were able to keep working with the technologies that they're used to. They didn't have to adapt completely to Drupal. They just had to learn, a little bit about info files and how that works, and able to continue to make great widgets. So, they ended up with a more stable platform with fewer support requests. The project, in a nutshell, was a complete success. Launch day at TWC was obviously very, very stressful. There's no other Drupal site in the world that gets as much traffic, I think, as weather.com does, especially with as much of it being so difficult to cache and so many requests falling down to origin. But when we launched, the site was stable, and they said that it was one of the most, or they didn't say it was one of the most, they said it was the most stable, easiest, best launch that has ever happened across all their products. So it was huge. Jason Smith, the guy I showed you earlier, I'm not kidding you, when he walked out at like 7:30 p.m. that night, they gave him a standing ovation as he walked out to the elevator. It was absolutely amazing, which Jason does not need a standing ovation because you could just watch his head go. But he deserved it because he worked extremely hard and overcame a lot of challenges. I mean, this is an hour-long presentation, but there's a lot underneath the covers here. But hopefully it gave you guys a good overview of what we went through. So I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about what we were able to give back. Mediacurrent feels is very, very important to be part of the Drupal community, not just profit from the Drupal community. And we make an effort for everyone on our team to have the opportunity to work in the contrib space. And we ask all of our clients to give us the ability to donate code and the stuff that we worked on back to the community. So Derek mentioned it earlier, but I actually didn't have it on my slide. What was the final name on the presentation layer project? Wizard Field. Awesome, thank you. And then we also have classy panel styles, which was used in a lot of other projects too, but kind of came out around this time, and that's actually Derek's baby right there, and has the awesome Will Ferrell logo, which is why it's at the top. Presentation framework became Wizzy Field, and also the Wixnode platform, and we actually had some other variations of that solved different problems. And then just as importantly as new contrib modules, we were able to make major patches to modules that are very important to websites of the size of weather.com. Storage API, working with third-party file systems. Storage API is an incredible tool for that. We ran into issues with volume and speed, the ability to push files back and forth to S3 very quickly, lots and lots of files, and the system would start to break down, so we were able to patch it and contribute that back. And same thing with meta tags and just even some panels core issues. And there's probably more than this too, but these are sort of high-level ones. So that was another great aspect of the project. Great success. All right, so any more questions? Yes, right here.
I work with you, so I use this a lot of times. I'm curious about something. When you visit the site on your mobile phone, you can sort of have that device detection, where you choose mobile versus desktop.
Mm-hmm.
Were you in the room privy to any of those discussions on why they felt it was necessary to ask these more questions?
Well, so this is my hazarding a guess. I wasn't privy to any of those discussions. We did a lot of work to have a mobile.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh yeah, it's a great idea. So the question was, when you visit the site on your phone, you're given an option to choose between the desktop or the mobile app experience. And Josh's question was I part of that implementation decision, and what do I know about it? And the answer is I was not part of that. How to successfully serve mobile and have sort of the amazing experience that they demand for their users on mobile devices is something that they have an entire team devoted to. I know that part of the pivoting that we did during the lifetime of this project was based around going into the project thinking that we would build the whole site as completely responsive, and then during the project watching their pretty amazing mobile team develop the latest version of their app and do so in a very timely manner and launch that. So that obviously made our work around device detection and serving up mobile a little bit less important, and we shifted gears to areas that were more important to them. I think they're trying to steer everyone to that app, but I'm not really sure what the major decision behind that is. Cool. Any other, yeah.
Yeah, what are the challenges in keeping core updated?
The challenges in keeping core.
Did they hack the core?
Yeah, we did we hack core? Derek? No kittens. No kittens died in the making of this project. We did. I don't think we hacked core either. At certain times during the project, we did have patches on core, and the reason why was to continue the velocity of development. When core was getting in the way of what we needed to do, knowing the timeline of the project, we would just change what we needed to change in core. This has more to do with deployment and sharing code between teams and Vagrant and being able to spin up test environments in core itself. But by the time we launched, core pristine. They actually have a really interesting architecture in place for deployments and for managing all the different versions on the site. I mean, you can think about the complexity that you have if you have a widget that changes versions for whatever business reason. They come in and say the 5-day forecast has these 3 new fields and it does something different now, and does that step on any of the other work that we're doing, and what do we do about the 20 other 5-day forecast widgets that are already in the system? Now we have to go find those and update them. So we track all of the instances of these and do it in a way that allows them to search for instances of presentation nodes across the framework, find them and update them as that happens. And then also from a development team perspective, any dependencies between versions of presentation layer modules are recorded in that manifest, and the system itself won't build if a dependency is broken. So if a team accidentally upgrades a widget to 1.6 from 1.5, and it has a widget that declares itself dependent on 1.5 of that previous version, when they go to make the build, it just won't happen. So they can't shoot themselves in the foot, so to speak. And that's all custom engineering, a lot of which that guy did right there too. Very, very difficult problem to solve though, and one that is near impossible to solve elegantly. Any other questions? Nope. Yes.
How did you guys decide when to actually use Angular versus having it rendered in Drupal? How did you decide when that was going to happen?
You mean the idea to move from Drupal handling the presentation to having a presentation framework, right? To having Angular or some other. So I wasn't part of that decision. I actually came in later, but I'm going to say with confidence that that was actually part of our POC to them. That was, from the very beginning, what we were telling them is that the only way that Drupal is going to work with the amount of traffic that you have and the type of data that you're serving is to have a third-party caching layer. And the best way to do that would be to go headless or pseudo-headless and use a framework to talk to that. And that would also, fulfill your need for development velocity, your need to use new technologies and not get locked in with whatever Drupal's framework presentation limitations are. So I would think from the very beginning they were planning on that. Yep. Okay.
You said that they were serving you content for Boston because that was what you were using most recently to search on?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Where is it gathering that information?
So I think by me searching on the, searching on the, in the search bar, let's pull that up again. Maybe pull it up again. Maybe we'll just go without the demo.
You weren't logged in. It's possibly to be a cookie, you think?
Yeah, I think it's a cookie. I think when you utilize the search itself and say, hey, take me to, what we can do is just go to the home page and we'll just dump the cache and clear all cookies and then refresh and see what happens. I don't know if that actually clears all cookies. Yeah, it's still thinking awesome. I think there's a cookie on there. Maybe a flash-based one, is what you said? I'm not sure. I didn't have cookies set on there. Let's try that now. Clearing. it does. All right, sorry, I had to switch it to all. You can't see what I'm doing over here, but I'm clearing for all time because I'm working on this everybody here. Okay, that should be fairly fresh. Yeah, and Atlanta comes up. So it's going to go off of where it detects you are by the browser first, and then track anything that it can from your interaction with the system, which is why when we were talking about context earlier, that it's not just location, it could be user interaction, or it's not necessarily, I guess, you logging into the site, you know what I mean? Okay, that's it then, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you.